that's one of the reasons why I do my podcast, is because I would like to condense that information down and kind of expose people to these ideas and theories and concepts that most people don't have the time to do themselves.
Well, nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you
So do
very
you
much.
have yeah, thanks for having me on. Do you have like a specific outline you want to do, or kind of just whatever we get into?
I'm not really having any. I like to just, as we just meet somewhere in a cafe, for example, which I always say,
Okay.
how we would go from there. But I was consuming your contents pretty much all day.
Okay. What did you get into?
Well, obviously, I went for your COVID parts episodes. But I had another record today as well, so I had a couple of hours break. But I tried to really get into as well, because obviously when the lockdown started, watching the news and trying to search and read more and more, which I already mentioned in an email, a little bit scared me at one point. So I was like, I stop reading about things, because it's sometimes it just doesn't help.
Yep.
But then I read your post on Reddit, and I was like, you know what? The whole reason as well I started this podcast, this series in lockdown, is about this as well, like what is going behind the scenes. And yes, in your podcast you always say that's your own opinion, that's your opinion. It's not like it's not like, but you're trying to do a disclaimer that it's not 100% fact. But if you look into those details, pretty much they are. So
yeah, I try to stick with things that are mostly proven, at least. And so that's a lot easier if I go like modern history, like 10 years ago, and you've got declassified documents that kind of show this is exactly what happened. But yeah, doing current event stuff, it's really hard because nothing's proven. So you never know for sure. But there's a lot of evidence and all the little pieces line up. So I try to stick with that narrative that I can back up logically and with facts. So even if it's not 100%, there's a very good chance that that's the way things are.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned so many times that the patterns are there through the history.
Yes.
So just, you have to look out for that.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And it's not stuff that you really see on the news. You either get the total conspiracy theory side that the virus is made up and everybody's, needs to go on about their business and it's nothing. Or you get the other side where if you step outside, you're killing grandma and it's, the end of the world. And so the reality is that it's somewhere in between there. And it's really hard to, battle all that information. A lot of the data is really bad. And so it's hard to find good data itself. But even when you do, you're concentrating so much on that stuff, and our lives are interrupted and everything's kind of crazy right now and it's weird and all this stuff that you kind of lose track of more of the larger politics and the macro, like sociological issues that are going on and changes happening in society and the people in the backgrounds. That's kind of it's almost feels irrelevant when our lives are being turned upside down and people are dying and it's a serious deal. So it's really hard to kind of, I guess, balance all those different things at the same time. Hard or impossible, but I do what I can.
Well, definitely. It's not just about these 3 episodes you've done, like as a special episodes or series or how you call it. In your whole podcast and your biography as well, it says you have a lot of knowledge, and the amount of work you must have put it in research it must be like, I don't know, like you made me feel like I'm doing what I'm doing is just, I'm just talking to people and yes, I'm reading through some like who is the person is really and what they're doing, but actually it's not much work I do with it, and I feel like I have to find another topic or something to actually feel like so useful in a sense. But now it's huge amount of work you must have done already.
Yeah, it's a lot of research, but it's stuff that I've been interested in, and so that really works out. It's stuff that I want to learn about myself. I have time to listen to stuff while I'm at work, and so I can do hours of research every single day during the week and consume stuff that I'm interested in, really educate myself, and then I can just, even though it's a lot of research and a lot of work from that perspective, most of it is while I'm at work doing my job and getting paid. So it's really nice. I'm not doing hours of work at home, over my computer desk. I'm kind of just listening to stuff all day long. And so that part of it makes it a lot easier because I can get hours of research done every week, but I'm not having to spend a lot of my personal time. So that's an advantage that I have that most people don't. And that's one of the reasons why I do my podcast, is because I would like to condense that information down and kind of expose people to these ideas and theories and concepts that most people don't have the time to do themselves. And so if someone doesn't have, 5 hours a day to research things, and if you did, why would you? That's, a little ridiculous. But I can give an hour-long podcast a week that can condense all that information down and try to get the really important stuff and try to explain it in a way that everybody can understand it. But at the same time, it's good information, it's detailed, it's stuff that even if you know the basics, you will still get stuff out of it, and that's kind of my goal, at least.
But I think it's very nice because for one, it's kind of a lucky part for you that you can do something for yourself while you're doing work. And as you said, there's not many people out there can do that. And the second,
Yeah.
that you're giving out value to people, because as I said, for now, I just listen to your COVID-19 episodes, and there is a lot of, and I'm not saying everything was new, because I do read or listened or watched a couple of things during the years, as you mentioned a few times, 9/11 as well,
Yeah.
and but there are a few things I try to like write down as well to make sure we're going through what is actually. I could see a lot on Instagram, because I'm mostly on Instagram myself. But the things are there also went through like weeks ago. Now again is something else taking the mainstream, as we all know what's happening. But like, I don't even know, like there's so many things about, you mentioned a lot about the vaccines, this ID card, the 5G. And I was like, I just got a new phone with the 5G, and the people like throw it away straight away. And oh my God, what's happening now? I'm so confused. Like, but things like that. And it's for me as well scary, and um, I just don't know like what is true. But again, I'm not doing the research to see what's the percentage of this. But I always say I believe everything can happen, because I already know that what people can do for money and power. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard because on one hand, when I was first looking into this and the pandemic first hit, you had doom and gloom on all the mainstream media, and governments were cracking down. World Health Organization said that it was like a 3.5 to 4% fatality rate, which is crazy. That's huge. And that's a really big deal. And you saw pictures of people in China, like bodies in the streets and just crazy stuff. And so that I have a wife that has severe asthma, and then we also have a 6 month old, and he's actually been sick prior to this a few months ago and had to go to the ER for breathing issues. So a respiratory virus is kind of a big deal for them. And so even if I would be perfectly fine, more than likely they might have issues. And so, especially at first, I was concerned about that. We were being very conservative. We were staying home, doing the isolation stuff, being very careful. But especially in the past week or two, it seems like a lot of the data that I was seeing from the beginning from like alternative media sources, which are from people that I trust and they are very well researched, but it is still alternative media, which is very different than like the CDC coming out with something. And so, since I was being more conservative about it, and we have personal considerations here, I was still suspect of what I was hearing, that, oh, this really isn't as big of a deal as they say. It's governments and people in power using it as an excuse. And I mentioned that in my COVID episodes, that governments and people of power are using this as an excuse. And they're going to do that whether it's totally made up or whether it's just the flu or worse, or whether it's, the worst virus ever to hit humankind. Either way, people in power are going to use it as an excuse to get more power. That's kind of just what they do. And so I've been more encouraged over the past few weeks. The CDC here in the States just announced that they've revised their data. And in their best case scenario, they're estimating that the fatality rate is 0.02%, and their most likely scenario is that it's 0.05%. And their highest scenario, like worst case, they say it's 0.5% fatality rate of at least of people under the age of 50. And so that's the bracket I am in. And so if regardless of conditions or health or scenarios, if it's, a 0.05% chance that this would be serious, that's not a very big chance. It might be double the flu, but it's still only 0.05% chance. And so if I'm seeing numbers like that coming out of official sources like the CDC, that makes me feel a little better. We've also, at least in my county, we recently opened back up. And so a lot of places are open now. They still have, social distancing and different policies like that. But with the numbers in my local county, they kind of did spike right away. We were getting a single digit number of new cases every day. And then it rose to about 80 to 90 cases a day that were new confirmed cases. And so it seemed like a big spike, but there wasn't a whole lot beyond that. It like spiked up to those numbers and then just stayed steady. And it doesn't seem like there's anything major going on. And it seems that with flu season being over, the weather's heating up, new data is saying it's not as bad as they were expecting. You had like Germany did a study in one of their departments and didn't release the documents, but then they got leaked. This was like a week ago. And in the leaked documents, they say that it's not really as big of a deal as the world is making it out to be, and that it's a bit of an overreaction. And they also said, I think the quote was that it's not beyond the normal range for a virus, was their wording. And so there are government official sources around the world that are saying, hey, it's not as big of a deal. But at the same time, you have other places where, I mean, you had like Italy and Spain, they were massively hit. You've got New York City in the States where it's massively hit. And so again, it's this balance of, it's perfectly understandable to do drastic measures in a very congested, crowded area, or in a nursing home. They're getting hit really hard. That makes sense. But like rural Tennessee is where I live in the States. And, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to a total lockdown somewhere where, the hospitals are completely empty and it's not really hitting all that hard. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's just interesting. It's how do you balance all that data when, one government is saying that, it's the worst thing in the world that's ever hit, and another government is saying that it's all blown out of proportion, it's no big deal, and then others are saying it's kind of a minor deal. And it's just hard to figure out because even the official data is not very accurate and you're getting different reports from all sides. So it's tough, I think.
Yes, it is, and I did not really went into it. And after a while, I was like, I'm not going to watch anything, any news whatsoever. I just stay away as much as possible from, like, all from the public. But yeah, Italy and Spain and even France as well got
Yeah.
a lot. And then after a while, I also was, as I said, I wasn't listening what's happening in UK, and maybe I'm going to be attacked by it. Just because I live here doesn't mean I want to know, really. Like, all the negativity is just like, it's just sad that
Yeah.
nearly thousands people died a day for like 2-3 weeks or something like that. Or I don't even know how was the peak, really. because I was like, I can't really take that much. And I can't even imagine. I was like, how on earth can die that many people a day in one country, but there is other 3 4 there where it's so bad? Like, I mean, how? And
Yeah.
obviously these questions are just like not expecting any answers in general. It's just so unbelievable.
Well, one of the interesting things about Italy in particular, I was hearing reports about that as it was going on maybe a month ago or so, as it was kind of really bad before things, I guess, kind of tapered off. And I think they're a little more stable now, at least. But the numbers that were coming out in the first, like after a month of this pandemic hitting them, were that I think it was somewhere around like 80% of the people were over the age of 70 something years old, and out of those, like 90% of them had multiple comorbidities, multiple underlying conditions that added to it. And so I think a lot of times it's more demographics and health. And so if you get hit in an area that has older demographics and unhealthier people with lower immune systems, it's going to get hit really hard. And we've seen that in the States, the main place is nursing homes. They've been hit really hard. But we also see countries in general that have older populations and that are more condensed and more packed in. This virus does spread a lot easier too. And so it is hitting certain places really hard, other places not as much. But it is, I'm with you, it's really weird because you look at somewhere like Japan, legally, their government is not allowed to shut down businesses. It's in their post war constitution, they're not allowed to do it. So they couldn't do forced shutdowns if they wanted to. Vietnam didn't do any forced shutdowns and largely remained open. I did an interview with the guy that was living in Vietnam like a month after this started. And so it's interesting hearing him. He said some shops shut down, some were making you like wait behind a certain line and then doing your business. But he said in general, things are kind of normal. And so you hear reports of countries like that that didn't do drastic measures. People were citing Sweden as one, but in Sweden, the government just gave recommendations, but the Swedish people seem to be very fond of listening to their government and basically did everything the government asked them to do. And so, even though it wasn't a forced shutdown, they pretty much followed all the same measures. And so, I don't know what all that means. I just wouldn't use that as an example of, hey, they didn't shut down. Look what happened to them. But there are others like Japan and Vietnam are ones I know for sure. I've listened to people that live there, so I have kind of firsthand knowledge, at least, of what it was like. And it seems like their numbers and what played out there was not worse or was much better than places that had major shutdowns. And those are highly populated areas with big cities. And so it's just really hard because, yeah, it's like you have these two totally different scenarios playing out, but it's with the same virus at the same time. And it's like how I still don't understand it. Some of it seems a little fishy, some of it seems like crappy data. Some of it just seems like, maybe it's just something like
Mm.
demographics or, I'm sure there are explanations, but yeah, it's hard to figure out what's really going on.
Well, in my opinion, as well as you said, is demographic as well. As if you see Italy, Spain, I think also that it's a lot of elderly there, and probably they are not healthy. If you look
Yeah.
Japan or Asia as well, they are like lots and lots of people. Like a population is big there, but I think like they are anyway like famous of their medicine, their health, how they live, the type of food they eat. Yes, I know where the virus came from. That's actually like because of the wet markets and things like that. But in general as well, they eat differently than we do.
Yeah, that is true.
They
Yeah, they're
eat
talking
much
about
much.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
no, you're fine. In the States, I know they're talking a lot about like minority populations, and same in other countries. In the States, it's generally Black people. And there are a lot higher rates of poverty in Black populations, and especially in big cities and places like that. And so, yeah, in my opinion, you have something like that issue. It's a socioeconomic issue where usually when you have groups of poor people, they usually have a lot lower health. And there's kind of a direct correlation between the amount of money you have and the health of a group of people, at least. But also, another interesting thing, I was talking with a pharmacist, I believe she was, just like 2 days ago. And she was talking about how the darker your skin is, the less efficient your body is at absorbing vitamin D from the sun. And so it does appear, all of the stats and tests that I have seen and studies have shown that vitamin D levels are very important to fighting off the virus. And so if you have somebody that has darker skin and they can't absorb as much vitamin D, this person I talked to said almost every single black person that came into their office always tests very low on vitamin D levels. It's just the way it is. It's their skin just doesn't absorb things the same way because it's darker. And so that can play an issue too, which is kind of hard to talk about because as soon as you start talking about someone's race and relating that to them being more at risk or something like that, then all of a sudden you get into either eugenics on one side or racism on the other, and neither one of those are very good. But those are real issues. So even if you can't talk about that in the politically correct mainstream media, it's true. And so those are things that have to be considered as well. But it seems like narratives like that, since it's a politically touchy subject, those aspects get thrown out, and instead it's a focus on racism. And we see that playing out right now all over the world,
Yeah.
but especially in the States with the protests and stuff. And again, it wasn't, at least in my opinion. So when I first saw the George Floyd video, it was on Twitter and I saw it pop up. I watched the first few seconds, then I was like, I know what's happening. I really don't want to watch this. And I didn't. But to me, it didn't like spark anything to me because I had seen videos similar to that, at least a dozen over the past 6 months, where it's a cop that ends up killing somebody. And by my definition, it would be murder. And usually it's no-knock raids where they'll bust into a house and the homeowner thinks they're being broken into usually and tries to defend themselves. Cops shoot them and they're dead. Sometimes it ends up being that it was the wrong house, and just really bad situations. But that has happened many times. A lot of the people I follow on Twitter, I've got a Twitter account for my podcast. I'd never done it before. And so I follow people that kind of are in line with the types of things that I cover, especially on the alternative side. And a lot of them are very against the state and very against the police in particular. And so I'm always seeing those. And I've seen so many of those that I saw this one and I was like, oh, it happened again. Like, what a shock. And the issue here to me is that it's an issue of power. It's the power of the state, it's the power of the police, and abuse of that power. And that's what's happening. That's the problem. It's happening over and over again with white people, black people, Hispanic people. Race doesn't really seem to be a big factor in this. However, this one video and this one case blew up into this giant protest worldwide, and it's this huge deal. And everybody is focusing on racism, and pretty much nobody is focusing on abuse of power and power issues. The only power issues is, oh, let's abolish the police department. Well, then what are you going to have? The military. Don't you not want, martial law in your city? Like, I doubt you'd be on board with that. And usually for us, it's more the left side politically, the what we would call liberals or progressive groups that are pushing for this. But at the same time, those are the same political movements that call for no one having guns and only the police should have guns. Citizens shouldn't have guns. Well, if you say only the police should have guns, but you also say the police can't be trusted with guns, it logically breaks down. And unfortunately, those types of conversations don't seem to be happening. And instead, it's just let's focus on racism and how bad it is and destroy everything. And it's just not productive at all.
I see. No, it's not. I mean, I don't want to get involved this. I didn't really on any social media. I wasn't sharing my opinion. For one, I can't really have opinion about this, really, racism or what, because obviously. But yeah, it's, as you say, it's power of abuse, and it's happened before and it will. And I know, like, as you said, it blew out now with this video, and hopefully something gonna change. Maybe, but maybe just for a bit. But the thing is, I understand anger and hurt. Oh, something came up here. Okay. But I don't know, they still forget about what other things can come up now. The virus is still out there, even
Yeah.
if it's real or not, of course, like, but let's just say it is. And I've seen the videos, how many people gather around to protest. I mean,
Yeah.
I know there are already the numbers you said, we are all healthy and everything, like, I've been sick as well. Obviously, I wasn't tested, so I don't know it was that or not, but it was a self-isolation with my family. And me and my partner, we both had some symptoms. The baby wasn't, so it's fine. But
That's good.
I felt like sick for a few days, like really, like I didn't feel okay. But even if it was that or wasn't, it could be something else. But I mean, people are going out and doing this whole thing. I mean, I'm sure there would be other way to do it. I don't know. I don't know how you can protest right way, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There's still so. I don't know. I'm not sure how to feel about it, and I don't really want to
Yeah.
say much because then I'm going to be like the worst person ever, and just because I'm thinking out loud.
Yep, yeah. Yeah, it's hard. They're all touchy subjects. You don't want to minimize the virus because then you get looked on as someone that doesn't care and doesn't care about old people or sick people, which, hopefully is not true of either one of us. But it's the same thing with racism. If you start talking about that, well, how are you qualified to talk about racism? And, like you said, in a lot of ways, we're not. So I don't focus on that a lot either. But yeah, it's hard because these things are happening and it's hard to figure out what is really happening. You hear a lot of narratives, you hear a lot of different information, a lot of different numbers. And to me, what I've been focusing on is more of the political and economic issues. And that was something I was already focusing on, was political and economic shifts that are kind of occurring in society today, and doing the history of that and assessing that right now. And so I was already focused on that. And then when I start seeing these things actually play out because of this, huge pandemic that hits, it's again, I hate to say this, that it's interesting, but it's interesting. I still do
It
care, and it
is.
is horrible that people are dying, but I can also be interested in the political ramifications at the same time as feeling bad about, the negative aspects of what's hitting. But yeah, to me, the biggest issue in all these, it's power. It's power that's shifting. It's power that's being applied differently. People are viewing governments and the states in different ways. They're viewing big worldwide organizations in different ways. People like the World Health Organization has taken a prominent role in this. The Gates Foundation has been a very big player, and it's things are changing, and the way people are viewing these positions of power and organizations are changing as well. People are focusing more on experts now than on their politicians. Politicians are getting criticized a lot, and the experts are actually given a lot of passes. You had there was a study done by the Imperial College of London, and that was the first one. And based on that, that's why like the UK and America did major lockdowns, was because of the statistics that study particularly was saying that there would be so many deaths and it was such a big deal. You have to lock down completely. And then it turned out that those numbers got revised. They basically got cut in half, and then they got revised down again. And so to me, if you're saying that 1 million people are going to die and then you end up revising that all the way down to like 200,000, that's still a bad thing. Yes. But the experts don't seem to be questioned as much. It's more, oh, well, they had bad data, or oh, they were just guessing anyway. But if a politician made a mistake like that, they're getting dragged through the coals. And this is happening with Trump. It's happened with Boris Johnson. It's happened with, politicians all over. And yeah, you definitely see that people are more, I guess they show more respect right now and have more trust in the experts and organizations of the experts than they do in politicians and governments. And so it's really interesting to see how those shifts are taking place, and it's happening at kind of breakneck speed right now because of this pandemic that hit. All of a sudden things are just going and changing, right away so quickly. And it's strange how it's all playing out.
Yeah, but how I see it, like the governments, the politicians are just puppets. They are just there as the acting stars, and the experts, as they're being paid by the organization and the big 1% of
Yeah.
how they want to the things be ruled out. And it's just, I mean, just because I see the study, not necessarily have to believe everything, but as you say, because I'm gonna come out with another one, and it's going to turn out it's not as a big, well, it's a big deal, but
Yeah.
like for me is it's a silly thing, but all my life I had to go to the doctor. I actually never wanted to be until I really had to. I always said I don't believe them. They just want to give me some pill instead of trying to figure out what is the problem. They're just trying to
Yep.
numb my pain. And that's it. I don't believe them. They want to do anything because they've been paid by the uh, I forgot English right now.
They're the big pharmaceutical
Yeah,
companies. Yeah.
thank you very much. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. But yeah, so I never really, I try not to take any painkiller whatsoever. It's just only when I really need to, because these kind of, like, I don't want to support things that I really don't believe in, and this is how
Yeah.
it's it's making me angry a little bit.
Well,
Like,
we could change gears to something a little more positive. Um, so, like along those lines, basically, what you spend money on and what you buy and what you do with your life does show your support or takes away your support from any given thing. And so, you've got that idea applied to these different areas. So, if you apply it to government, the reason governments have power is because the people give them that power. And if people didn't support their governments and didn't give them that authority and just said no in mass, government's gone. Like there's nothing they can do to force subservience of the people unless they just start murdering people in the streets in mass. And that's not going to happen. And they're not going to look very good once they start that. And then they're definitely getting out of there. So, yeah, it's you give support to certain things based on how you live your life. And money is a really good thing. I think money has a lot more power than voting, definitely. Where you spend your money, that money then gets used to further whatever thing it is that that company or corporation is doing. And so if you're spending money that goes to big pharmaceutical companies, that will fund those pharmaceutical companies. That's the way it works. And not only that, but you are giving your support of that system where you have pharmaceutical companies that are involved with the universities that are teaching doctors and training them on what they should do when they become real doctors. And they're also paying real doctors and hospitals to prescribe certain things and giving them kickbacks and things like this. And they're getting subsidized by the state. And then they have lobbyists usually that are helping write regulation that regulates their industry. And it's all totally corrupt. But you end up giving that support when you use your money with those types of people and in that system. So I'm with you that my goal would be to live in such a way that I am not supporting these corrupt organizations and systems. I do not support them definitely, but I also don't want to support them financially. I don't want to support them by acting like they deserve my respect. I've had a really hard time. The military is a really big one for me because war, in my opinion, it's a racket and it is one of the biggest travesties in modern time. And almost every single modern war, at least that America's been involved in, I haven't done research on other countries, but in America at least, almost every modern war we've been involved with has been started off of lies. We have gotten in because someone lied about an event or something being the case. It wasn't, but they lied about it and got us into war, and then hundreds of thousands of people die. That's horrible. That's human sacrifice.
yeah.
But at the same time, those soldiers are fighting for their lives and the lives of the people beside them and the freedoms of their families and all these, noble qualities, even though in reality they're not. And that's the problem, is that the system is such that in modern wars there are political they're just it's all political. It's all about gaining power, gaining territory, gaining control by politicians and bureaucrats, and the soldiers are the ones dying for it. they think they're dying for the freedom of their country and for their fellow man, but in reality, they're actually supporting this corrupt system by being involved with it. And so that's one example where it's really hard because I don't want to minimize the sacrifice of military personnel. They do very brave things and very heroic things. At the same time, the system is totally corrupt and is all about human sacrifice, which is evil. And I do not support that at all. So it's really hard to kind of toe that line in normal society where you don't look very good if you say something bad about the military and soldiers because they're the heroes and you should respect them and be in awe of them. And it's like, well, yes, but there's this other side as well. And so there's some mainstream things like that, or like government in general. If you go out and tell people that you don't support government as a whole and that you believe in anarchism of some degree, then people think you're crazy and that you're voting for like rioting in the streets and that's what you want. And it's like, well, no, I just might not believe that some people should rule over other people. That doesn't go well. And but that's not a respectable thought. And so it's hard. To me, it's all about finding ways of living in such a way that you are not supporting these types of systems, but also doing it in such a way, at least for me, where I am still following the laws of my local country and state. And so it's another balancing act where there are these gray areas of let's say something like growing food. I can grow my own food. We have a lot of gardens at my house. We've got 2 acres, so it's a decent size bit of land, not huge, but decent size. And we grow a lot of our own food. We've tried to do that more and more. And that's a way that I can save money, which is good for me. I can also make sure I'm eating food that doesn't have pesticides on it. It's not GMO. It's not unhealthy in those ways. So I'm not supporting big agriculture, which is, also another corrupt system. And I'm not spending money in the store, which means I am not giving tax money to the government that I don't agree with as well. And so by doing things on my own, or we've got someone we buy our beef from, ground beef from, and he has a farm about an hour away and he has cows and processes them and sells the beef. And we buy from him. Well, when I do that, I don't know, but I would guess he's probably not reporting all the income for tax purposes. Most people, like you go to a yard sale or garage sale or something like that, like you buy something for 10
Yeah.
bucks cash, you're not going to write that down on your taxes. That's ridiculous.
You
And
should though,
so
but yeah.
yeah, technically you should, but if I do that, there's a much greater chance that I am not contributing to a system that I believe is corrupt and inefficient to the state. And so there's a lot of ways like that the idea would be agorism. There was a book written by Samuel Edward Konkin III. He had a very
Okay.
grand name, but he wrote a book on agorism and coined that term, and it's based on the Greek word agora, which was the marketplace where people would go, they would buy and sell things, but they would also talk and they would conversate and meet up. And so he coined this term agorism, where it's all about operating outside of the system. And so you are buying things, selling things, you're making things, you're doing things in a way that is totally unreliant on big corporations and on governments. And that's a concept that I've really latched onto over the past few years, where I can do that in ways that I'm not breaking the law. I am definitely not hurting anybody, and I'm not supporting these things that I don't agree with. And so, like, one of the things I've done during this quarantine time with COVID-19 is I've put in more gardens. I've planted more berry bushes and fruit trees and all kinds of stuff. And I've planted around 300 plants in the past 2 months. So it's been a lot of putting in a lot of stuff that's going to produce for me and help me operate outside of the system. And I like that because it's not that I'm like growing drugs in my backyard and selling them on the street and hoping the cops don't bust me. I'm just growing vegetables and fruit. It's not that big of a deal, but I can do that in a way that I control the health of my food. I control how my money is spent, and I control all of these things. That's something that I want if I believe that that big agriculture companies, the Monsantos of the world are number one corrupt, but number two, basically poisoning people. I don't have to support that. And there are ways of doing that. I may not be able to do that 100%, definitely not right now, but I can work towards that and do that in ways that I can. And it's the same, you mentioned like not wanting to support the pharmaceutical industry. Well, there are plenty of natural things, such as I think in Europe it's much more common. It's kind of a hip thing now to take elderberry syrup when you get sick. That's a fairly natural thing anybody can do, not that big of a deal. And it's a good treatment for getting a minor cold, and it helps your immune system and it can be good for you. There's lots of things like that, like taking supplements to boost your immune system, and then you don't get sick as much. It means you don't go to the doctor as much, which means you don't get prescriptions as much. Lots of things like that are things that we can do that number one are good for us in general. They help us save money or improve our health. But number two, we're not supporting these systems we don't agree with. And so I've been trying to focus on some of those things. I had about 2 months of downtime with the shutdown and everything. And that's what I've really been focusing on at my house with my family, trying to get us more self-sufficient and separate from the big systems that I don't agree with as much. And that way, my support goes to things that I agree with and that I want to support, and I can withdraw support, so actually have a negative impact on these systems that I don't believe in. And if that happened in mass, then a lot of these systems wouldn't be able to exist. And so that's one of the big messages that I would like to get across a lot of times, and that I'm implementing myself, because that's a way of having like a nonviolent revolution. I mean, no one's
Yep.
getting hurt. Everybody is better off by this, except maybe a corporate executive that's losing some money, but I'm sure he'll make it somewhere else. I'm not worried about him.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm really trying to focus on and do. That's one of the positive sides of the quarantine and the shutdowns and all that. I've been able to implement that myself, and it's been really nice.
Yeah, like that book I heard that you already mentioned in your podcast as well, but that was so many information there. I was like, oh my god, I really I was like, I need to give some break for myself before actually we sit down. But I was like, no, that's good. And for me, it's harder to do things like that because I'm renting the house. So if I do the garden, but if I need to move or something, which is just like, it wasn't like this or whatever, that how they can be. But
Yeah.
it's that book is very interesting, and I'm going to find it. And I'm going to ask you as well to please write it down for me. I want to look into it, and yeah, it's not. That's this is my big success dream when I have my own little farm, middle of nowhere, but still like possible driving distance from bigger cities or towns or whatever. But that's how I want, just to have my own electricity, to really like be on my own out there with my family, and just live our lives free. I don't even want to work really, like I mean the money I don't care about. I know it's actually
Yeah.
you can't live without money, but some ways we're gonna find our way that I hope one day we're gonna go back where the money doesn't exist again. But I guess there's gonna be something else what we need to fight for. So that's a really big dream. Actually never going to come true, but yeah. There's so many things written down here, and I don't even know. But we covered already a few anyway. Even more that I didn't even want to bring up really what is happening right now. But it's part of it, because we are losing the sight of the virus, or what that you're saying. You don't want to use the word interesting.
Yeah.
But it is, because I know it's very painful for so many people. And I personally know or met a couple of people already when I was out shopping, and their family members sick or died of the virus. But it is interesting what's happening, because as I heard you as well saying it, when it actually started, the whole panic, I was like, as I said at home, that I think we need to start just getting a couple of things, what is really important, like very necessary, like dry food or canned food, because I think it's that people are gonna go mad. And my girlfriend was like, oh, come on, just leave it. And we both working in retail in a big supermarket. And I was like, just every day, a couple of things, just let's get. Now it's okay. And then people started to go mad. Yep. And the problem is, what actually happened, we were on holiday, but we planned not going anywhere. Like, just stay at home with the 17 months old, 18 or, she was 18 months, we're just doing our thing. And then I never watched news. I just only watched for 3 weeks when it started, but I don't watch news at all. And then holiday, and I'll go back to work for a week. I was like, what the hell is happening, guys? Like, what is going on? And then the toilet paper all gone, but which I found funny in a way, that everybody focused on that first.
Yeah.
Like why? And I don't understand the whole behavior behind it.
I'd say it's like a herd mentality, and that people act like a herd a lot of times. And so when you get this narrative that gets pushed on the news every day that, oh no, we're going to run out of toilet paper, then everybody goes out and buys toilet paper, and they're freaking out. And they're not, we have a problem with critical thinking in today's world, and they're not thinking about, hey, maybe I should get some real food. Maybe I should get healthy food even, instead of boxed mac and cheese or something. They're not thinking 2 steps, 3 steps on down the road. They're thinking, well, what if I run out of toilet paper? That'd be horrible, which I guess it would be. But yeah, there's a lot more serious things to think about, like survival and having food, I think would be more important. But yeah, people don't focus on that. They just focus on whatever the mainstream narrative is that they're hearing all over the place, and they freak out, and they all act the same way at the same time. And yeah, it's chaos. It's a mess.
Yeah, it's like, and I was working there, and I was like, things like what is not matter, that those food, they are like empty, and I'm walking through I don't know how many kilograms of potatoes through, on the shop floor. And I was like, why on earth you're not like, oh sorry, my thing is gonna turn off. But why on earth you don't think, and God damn it, sorry, I use this a lot today already. So I just don't see the point for some kind of behavior, to be honest. Like, but yeah, so what I wanted to say really is the interesting part. It is because I already knew that it's going to be a big change.
Yeah.
In such a life, as because how many people lost their jobs? I might not going to have a job when I'm supposed to go back. Yeah. Because I'm not working in I do work in a retail, but it's not like I'm working in a cafe in a supermarket.
Okay. Yeah.
And yes, I see what's happening, but for me, the last week we were like, what the hell are we doing? Because people not coming up, not coming to have the normal coffee and stuff. And I don't know if we're gonna have really job or not. I mean, I don't know. I really hope my team is not gonna listen to this now, because then they're going to be like, they're like, oh, why are you not telling me anything? But yes, and I really want to know where this goes, and not just because this ID card, are you vaccinated or not, which I don't want to. I'm really against it. No. But it's more like what this business kind point of view make it just easier to hear, because for me, you have to talk to me that simple. Maybe
Yeah,
because
well,
of English is not my first language, but so there's some words are like okay, I never heard that, but yeah, it's I want to look into this, and because now I found your depth in it, it made me think that I don't know nothing about. I don't have a
yeah.
B plan.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way when I first started looking into a lot of the stuff I started on. I realized that, even though I went through school and I got a degree and I felt like I was smart and knowledgeable and made good grades, like I realized I didn't really know anything. I didn't really understand any of this stuff and they don't teach it. And so, yeah, a lot of it's having to educate yourself then because, you didn't get it going through school most likely. And yeah, things like this are unexpected. You're not planning for it. It's kind of the fringe groups that have been focused on self sufficiency and things like that. And so now something like this hits. And I think a lot of people are realizing that, hey, we should have been prepared for this. We should have a plan. We should have some food in store just in case anything were to happen. You never know what could happen. Things like that. And I think that's one of the positive things that will come out of this is that people will be more prepared and more focused on their health and on being prepared for the unforeseen that could happen at any time. But yeah, some of the social issues are really weird where handshakes are probably not going to be as normal as they were. Hugs and just hanging out and talking to people and getting close with them. That's something that I'm afraid of, that you'll be scared to even get within 3 feet of someone in line at the grocery store, much less like meet a new person. Heaven forbid you meet someone new because you might give them a virus and it's horrible. Or if you happen to cough or sneeze and you're out in public, then everybody looks at you like you're spreading disease around. And it's just, I think there are a lot of dangerous effects that has on just culture in general. And I'm really hoping that this is temporary and that those things go back to normal. But my rough theory right now, at least, is that things will start to go to normal, back to normal soon. And you had, I know in the States we had this, I don't know if you guys did, but there were some protests against the lockdowns. And there were a lot of people kind of speaking out against it. And there were some protests where people got out in the streets and they were not happy that the state was locking things down. And it kind of felt like people were getting a little fed up. They were kind of done with it, and they weren't going to listen anymore. And that's kind of right when all these new protests started. Was right about that same time. But I think we're at the point where people will get tired of it and they will say, hey, things are dying down. I'm not seeing it a lot in my personal life and people I know. Let's kind of get back to normal. We don't want to lose these aspects of our culture and friendships and stuff. And I think that will happen. People will get closer to normal, but a lot of the preventative measures will probably still be in place, especially in businesses where you might have like some lines in the floor where you have to wait in a line and you distance from people, or pushing for a cashless society where you're not passing out that dirty cash and spreading disease and all that kind of stuff. So I think all of these will be running in the background and they'll still be there, but people will start to kind of get back to normal. And then my prediction, at least, is flu season rolls around next year, and it will because we have a flu season every year. That's just the way things go. And now we have a new virus that's going to be around with all the other flu strains. And I think I think we've been prepped to be ready for a second wave. I think that narrative has been pushed ever since this thing first hit. It's been this talk of this, dreaded second wave. And either it will be horrible or it won't be horrible. And I think regardless of what it really is, I think that is going to really solidify a lot of the things that people were thinking were going to be temporary. And a lot of states and a lot of certain types of people will be basically blaming those crazy liberty people for this new spike. And it's like, yeah, your beloved liberties and freedoms, look what happened to society when you actually expressed them and got out and interacted, and instead of following all these guidelines and staying apart and all this stuff. And I think a lot of people will fall for that and they'll feel bad. They'll be pressured. And I think a lot of these more temporary measures might become more ingrained after that happens. And maybe governments will be pushing through some new bills, things related to like the cashless society thing is an easy one. People have been pushing for that for a long time. I
I
think
don't
with
mind that
today's
though.
technology, yeah, yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, that's a lot easier. You can, scan your phone and pay for something instead of having to like dig out and find all these bills and change. And it is a lot more convenient. It's a lot easier, and it does make a lot of sense. And I think a lot of those types of things will happen. And I guess what I am worried of is that though the positive um, gains in efficiency and things like that you get out of something like going cashless, there are a lot of efficient aspects of that. It's a lot more effective, a lot more efficient. But I think a lot of those will get co-opted um, for more nefarious purposes. For example, if you have a digital currency, a government or an organization, whoever's in charge of it, can track and trace every single purchase from every single citizen, every single transfer. You can't give your friend $10 without them knowing that you gave your friend $10. And people are worried about like their data being collected on Facebook or on Amazon or whatever. Well, this would be like all of those combined. It's everything that you spend money on and use your money for, which is, all kinds of things in life. All that data is collected in one place for every single person. And again, that in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. But when you look at kind of the corrupt systems and the organizations and governments that would probably be in charge of this, and a lot of times they do things that are corrupt and bad for people, and they would then have a lot more power and a lot more information and data to do whatever they wanted and push whatever agenda they wanted. And so that's kind of my issue, is that on one hand, some of these things are good, like a vaccine, prevent disease. That's great. I love that idea. But if you look at the history of vaccines and some of the things in vaccines, and they're rushing one through like in half the time, probably less than half the time of normal, without doing the tests and all this kind of stuff, that's probably bad. And the people in charge of it are major eugenicists that have been talking about population control for decades, and they're the ones that are trying to save the population of the world. I don't trust that. I don't.
No. Well, no. So to go back, there is a one documentary film about this collecting data and stuff. That I think it called The Hack or Hacked. I remember I was starting watching it, but I don't know if I actually finished it. That was a couple of months ago just, and it was about actually Facebook, like Mark Zuckerberg were already in front of the judge and stuff because he gave everybody's data out, and it was about the CEO of Cambridge University or something like that, or analytics. I haven't, as I said, I haven't really got into it, and so they got our data, which I did not remember signing anything, But obviously, when you read your terms and conditions, so they already having these things, and even if I'm using Android phone, so obviously I'm Google, but if I'm searching anything, obviously that I'm going to Facebook or Instagram or any social media, I get popped up already advertising the things I just searched, or even my partner searching. And I was like, why these adverts coming up? Because I wasn't even, but then I remember that she was looking for something there. And so they already collecting this kind of data, but I guess we are going more in depth in what we are doing or how we are doing it. And I even the banks we are with, who are with, they already looking what we are doing, like more everything you can see. Like I really don't like to even download any apps on my phone because it already comes up to allow this, the contacts, the text messages or phone calls, listening to it, and like trying to always deny it, but then
then you can't use the app.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so a few times they were like, even if the phone calls were on it and text, I was like, okay, then you go, because no. But then we using Zoom. I'm
Yep.
pretty sure they have already all data as what we do, and even they can access to this recording. So I think in our world, or where we are going now, in the future, we're not gonna have private. We don't have privacy now at all, anyway. Not
No.
really. So we
At
just
least
have
people
to.
think they do.
Yeah, I try to, like, we just have to. So have to get used to it because, or fight against it, but then what's going to happen? So I guess we can't really do much about it, but at least I want to know. Don't do
Yeah.
it behind my back, because I understand this whole technology and what's coming, what we don't even know about yet. Like, this is what you get if you want to use it, and you have to use it, because now, I keep saying it, if this lockdown happens 20 years ago, yeah, I would be just 15, and I would be happy kid and playing outside in the garden or whatever. But if I'm in the same age as now, by 20 years ago, I don't know what would I do other than reading my books, but I don't know how many books I would have at home. You know what I mean? But
Yep.
we wouldn't be able to do this, which is obviously, let's take advantage of the technology what we have, but we have to pay for that
Yep.
now a lot.
Yeah, and that's
Definitely.
where I've been interested in, like, blockchain technology. Have you looked into blockchain or cryptocurrency at all? Bitcoin, that kind of
Now,
thing?
I tried before, but I don't think my brain can consume that. I mean, people try to talk to me about Bitcoin and stuff, and I was like, I'm sorry, I just don't get it. But
Okay.
it always takes one person to be able to translate to somebody
Yeah.
else what it is about. So go ahead and let's see if I
Well,
actually.
the
You
the
never know.
biggest thing about it is that it's not centralized. So instead of having one bank or one government control a currency and have all that information, all that data, instead of that, you have thousands or millions of people all around the world that are using their own computers to process transactions and basically work the network behind the scenes. And so it's not all concentrated in one place. And then depending on the cryptocurrency, there's a lot of them that have privacy encryptions where your data is completely private and no one knows that it's you that sent this amount of money to so and so. A lot of them don't even know who you are or who so and so is or how much money it was. So
Hmm.
they've got technology where you can verifiably send money, so to say, to somebody, but it can be done with complete privacy and also be done in a way that you can completely trust that that transaction occurred the way it was supposed to. And so there are groups that are applying this to things like chats and text messages and publishing videos and having a browser, things like this, where you can apply a lot of these principles of decentralization and having more control over your information and your data, more privacy. And really, there is nothing that a centralized source can do to stop that. Even if a government cracked down and said Bitcoin's illegal, they can't shut down the network. It's still going to exist all around the world, and there's nothing they can do about that. And so it can't be hacked, it can't be altered, and going into it what the rules are for that currency. It's not like right now the U.S. has recently I don't know, printed off trillions of dollars for support for the pandemic and for big corporations and things like that. And so all of a sudden, we had, so much money that was in circulation at one time, and then all of a sudden there's trillions more that flooded in. And so anytime you have more of a given thing than you had before, it becomes less valuable because there's more of it. It's a lot more common. So it's not as valuable as it was before. And that's a problem you have with money. That's where you get inflation from, or one of the sources. And so if you have something like Bitcoin, where you cannot just arbitrarily create more Bitcoin, It's impossible. No one can just say, hey, we need a million more Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and make it. That's just not the way it works. You have to, you do what they call mining, where, as your computer processes transactions for the network and you're doing work to help the network run, you get reimbursed for that in Bitcoin. And so that's how new Bitcoin are created. And so you have to do work. It's part of the system running. It's not something that, a person or a group can just decide to create. And there's other coins that do things different ways. Some have set inflation rates, and they all have different rules based on how they believe a currency should operate. But the point is, I can find out what that is before I start using that system or that currency, and I have control over my information to whatever degree I want. I can use one that's very low cost, but that's public. I can use one that's private. It might be a little more expensive to send a transaction, or I can do one that's more mainstream, like Bitcoin, that's accepted a lot more places. But I have control over that. And all that data and the network itself, the system itself, is not controlled by a centralized source. And so I like that idea. I think one of the big problems, though, is that most of the big corporations are often subsidized by governments, and governments want these corporations to exist and to gather data, because even though Facebook has a lot of data and Amazon has a lot of data and so does Microsoft, they are at least contained and broken apart. Banks have a lot of data, but this bank might have, so much data, and this bank has different data, and this other bank has even different data. It's not just one source, but a government is one source. And like for us, the CIA, the NSA would be our intelligence operations and departments, and they can get that data all in one source. They can get it from these corporations, compile it all together on a given person or a given population, and all of a sudden that is a lot of power to have. And I do not believe that it is wise to have that much power invested in one group or one person. That historically does not go well. And so I think the decentralized options are the way to go, and they show a lot of promise, but they are not getting supported by government contracts and by grants and stuff from governments and universities. And so they don't have that extra support. It's more of a kind of a ground level movement where people that are at the bottom, so to say, are doing all the work. There are people writing the code for these different blockchain projects and not really getting paid much for it. They believe in the ideology and they want it to succeed, so they are working on it. And it's really cool, and I like that. But it's challenging because there's not as much funding for it. It's not mainstream. It will be fought by governments because obviously they don't want competition. And you also have the issue of usability. So like, you don't really know much about blockchain. You don't know much about Bitcoin.
Yep.
And so if I, told you about this and you're like, oh, that sounds great. We can use this other currency and we don't have to support a system we don't believe in. That sounds really good, but you don't know how to do that. And so, and that's the same with most people. Most people aren't aware of how that works, and they might download a wallet, and that's what you do. You have a digital wallet that stores, we'll use Bitcoin as the best example. It stores your Bitcoin, and you have this private key is what it's called. It's like a password, a long password. And that's how you access your digital wallet. Only you have that password. So a government can't shut down your bank account. The bank cannot take your money. You have full control. You also have full responsibility. And if you lose that password, you lose everything that was in that wallet. And that can be a problem. And so there's issues like this.
Okay, so you can't go to forgot my password option.
Nope.
Okay.
But there is a caveat to that. There are projects that are working on ways of doing things like that. So there are companies that have online digital wallets that have features like that. And there are other sites that you can go to, and you basically give your private key to the site, and they encrypt it and keep it private. And then they have a way of verifying that it's you if you ever need access to that again. So there are options there, but it kind of goes against the principle of having full control and ownership of your own money, because now all of a sudden someone else could potentially hack that company and get your passcode and take all your money. which they can do at a bank too. Banks are usually insured and you get that money back. Some of the exchanges that deal in cryptocurrencies are also insured and would and have given money back when they've been hacked before. But the advantage is if you are the only person that can access it, you cannot be hacked unless someone physically comes to your house and threatens you and you give them your passcode. There's no other way for them to get it. They have to get that private key. And if you store it in a locked deposit box at a bank, then even if they come to you and threaten your life, you still can't get it because you don't have it. It's, in the bank. And so
Yeah.
you have a lot more control. There, to me, it's a much better system, but you have this issue of basically people being educated in how to use it and how it works and what the pros and cons are. You need people that want to take a little more responsibility and that are willing to give up a little bit of convenience in exchange for a lot more control and a lot more privacy. And that's one of my biggest complaints with society today is that we live in an age where people want convenience and entertainment. And if it is not convenient or entertaining, they do not want to have anything to do with it, no matter
Yeah.
how good it is or, the benefits they would receive. And so that's why you have people that are, eating fast food every single day and they're 400 pounds and they're on 20 medications and they're going to die when they're 30 because it's just not worth it to them to do anything different. They like it. It tastes good and it's easy and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And people do that kind of thing to their own detriment. And so that's a problem. And it really prohibits a lot of these types of movements from gaining traction and actually going somewhere because people aren't really interested in learning or educating themselves or going out of their way to do something. And that's what you need if you're going to have any of these things succeed. So it's hard. Like today and the past few days, I've been listening to a podcast with some lectures and an audiobook about the American Revolution and the colonial era. And it's been really interesting because a lot of those ideologies that came out of England and out of the States were, I guess, before they were the States, but a lot of those ideas and ideologies were things that were going around. That's all right.
It was so silly. I wasn't keep an eye on my phone, and I'm gonna have a proper internet on Wednesday, so I'm using my phone, and I was like, Jesus, why did you froze? I was like, what's
Yeah.
happened? And I was like, oh my God, that was really silly. Uh,
Well, I do have another roughly 45 minutes is kind of my
okay,
hard stop. So we've still got plenty of time.
well, it's up to you. It's up to you how long you want to take it, obviously. I had a coffee just before 10 p.m. So,
Yep.
but now I can sleep like this, so it's not a problem at all. I'm really sorry.
Okay.
It was like, oh my God, that was really stupid. I really don't like to use that word, but it was. It's still
Well, at
converting the
least,
other.
okay, so it did save that half of the conversation at least.
It's still 28%, but
Okay.
it's converting the recording, which is like, oh my God, I hope you did not lose it. I was like, please.
Yeah. Well, I had that happen one time. I was doing an interview and we were like 45 minutes into it. And then it was on Discord and it just dropped it. And we couldn't figure out why, but it just stopped and didn't save it or anything. We had to totally redo the whole thing. It was a pain.
Yeah, I can imagine. I was like, oh my God, my heart. I started to sweat and everything. I was like, no. I mean, I'm having a good time and learning a lot, but like at least just have the recording. Yeah, sorry, you were middle of your thoughts actually. I don't know if you remember what you were talking about, so just
I know where I
let's
was
make a
going. I
cut.
don't know where I left off. Yeah.
That's okay. Just continue where you meant to go.
Okay. So yeah, in today's society, people are really focused on entertainment and convenience. And if they don't have that, they don't want to have anything to do with whatever it is. And the problem is that if there's going to be a movement of any kind, if it's going to be a movement that's towards true environmentalism and taking care of the planet, or towards increasing privacy and controlling your own data, or self sufficiency, or whatever the movement might be, you have to have people on board with a common ideology and that are willing to sacrifice some amount of entertainment and convenience in exchange for joining and educating themselves and living out whatever that movement is. And that's one of the big problems I see today. One of the things that gives me hope is that I've recently been doing a lot of research related to the American Revolution and the colonial era. And one aspect of that that I was listening about today is Thomas Paine, who was a famous author at the time. He wrote Common Sense, which was a pamphlet that talked a lot about how there should not be a king and people should not be ruled, and a lot of these concepts related to more political theory, political philosophy, that kind of stuff. But it was a fairly short pamphlet, and it circulated. I actually recently just did ran the numbers on calculating what it would be today, and it was the equivalent of if an author in the United States sold over 12 million copies. And so that was the circulation of this pamphlet, Common Sense, in the colonies at the time, if you do the ratio of their current population at the time. And so the point is that it wasn't just the intellectual elite that were getting on board with this ideology and getting on board with this movement. It was the masses. It was just the normal people. And people were interested in this, and they were reading it and discussing it and acting on it. And this is something that has happened historically. It could happen again today. And that's what I'm hoping for, is that maybe events like this kind of spark people to, I guess, kind of point out some of the things that they should be working on. I know for me personally, me and my wife had talked about building up a stash of food already. We had talked about this like a year ago, where the idea that I had heard from someone else was that when you go to the grocery store and you buy something that's a non-perishable good that doesn't go bad, buy 2 of them or 3 of them, and you keep the one that you use, and then the others are your extra stores, and you know, keep them in your pantry or wherever it is you have extra room. But the point is that you're going to be getting things that you actually use, and you're going to be building up a stash, and that way, if anything were to happen, and it could be something like this, where a pandemic, you know, goes around, or maybe there's a major power outage, or maybe you lose your job and you're having a hard time making ends meet. Well, you have all this food stored up already and you're prepared. And so you're not as reliant on that income or on electricity or on the stores being stocked or whatever it may be. And that's something that that I realized I had not done. We had talked about it, we thought about doing it, but we hadn't. And we were kind of caught a little off guard, like I think everybody, when this hit. And luckily, I kind of went out and stocked up when it first hit, and that was before everything was sold out. And so that was really nice. I kind of got everything I needed, didn't have any problems, and we were all good. But it did point out that thing that we were neglecting of having some stuff in storage and being prepared. And I'm hoping that these events and things that are going on now will kind of help people to realize that, hey, you know, this thing is something that I wasn't really aware of, or this is something that we should have prepared for and now we're going to implement, or, you know, this is something I need to educate myself on, whatever the case may be. Hopefully people will kind of spark interest in these different things that that they might not have been motivated to do on their own without having some sort of outside motivation, like a massive pandemic worldwide. And so hopefully we can see some of these movements really gaining steam, people getting behind them and incorporating some of these what I would consider positive ideologies into their lives. And that's what I'm hoping for. I definitely don't see that in the common masses in general. I see convenience and entertainment being prized above all else. Uh, but that doesn't mean that that it couldn't possibly play out that way. You know, people could change, and this could spark an interest in those types of things. Or you could even just have a remnant of people, a very small amount of people that that get more focused on these things. People that were kind of on the fence and that had thought about these ideas, like me with storing up food. I thought about that. We talked about it. And I was, so to say, on the fence. I wasn't sure if we'd do it or not. Well, now we're definitely going to do it. And so even if it's just a small amount of people, if they're dedicated and they really try to do these things, to maybe buy things that are made by local people and support local shops, or maybe it's make some stuff yourself and on your own, or maybe it's educating yourself on something that you realize you didn't really know much about or didn't understand very well, but it's fairly important. Whatever it may be, all it really takes is a small percentage of the population to really get on board and get behind something for it to actually gain steam and to go somewhere. And so that could be one of the positive reactions to this pandemic, whether it be now or after the second wave, or however things play out. But that's what I'm hoping for, is that it kind of sparks some of these positive ideologies to really take hold and to take off, and things that would not have otherwise. Maybe it'll be that push that really gets them going.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like I say, every little adds up. If it's just a couple of people, like small amount, like your family and close friends starting to talk about it, but those friends have other friends but you're not friends with, and it's just slowly adds up. But and you said, like, it's even me as well, like, you're too lazy to get into something because it takes work for one. Yep. And obviously it's much more easier to just nodding and go after. That's why the big corporations and the government likes people like that. I mean, I just talked to my sister. Obviously I'm not living in Hungary, and I don't want to know anything about what's happening, but it's just getting worse and worse. The political, like, what is that? I just don't want to hear it, because it's just awful, like way worse. And like, that's supposed to be democracy as well, but it's like getting there as a dictatorship already for a while now. And how say it not be mean and cruel, but people are stupid. I'm sorry, like, we are stupid. And on the other hand, like, the other problem is, like, people like me want to know something, like want to get more truth behind everything, but I think the problem is I'm going to the wrong source. So there is all the two end, the governments, or what we should, the media and all the things, or I go to the other side of it, where is just everything theory. And I think we need the people like you, or your podcast, or because you go behind that theory, you checking as much as you can, like whatever you can find in one certain topic or area or subject or whatever we call it, you go really back to the history as far as you can to see it is true or not. And then everybody can decide, but actually you provide the information that, yes, your own opinion, but then we can decide, do we want to go with this opinion or not? And definitely I think there's so many people are changing around me, or I can see the people I'm talking to, everybody's like, everybody's hoping that we are going to create something different, a new normal. Around what we can. It's all about, like, how the mindset as well. But I'm going to when I'm going to back to work, or when I go to shop as well, I'm trying to get something a little bit more now. We can. I don't think there are already rules how many stuff you can buy. Before, you could only just get one milk and one pasta, for example, because they stopped let you take anything else. And I think there's no such rules. But I really hope people are changing at least a little bit. like most of us, let's hope that like not just everybody is a sheep, you know, we are not behaving sheeps anymore. um, and and maybe there is going to be something else in our
Yeah.
behavior.
I think the key is critical thinking and thinking logically and rationally instead of emotionally. That's something that is very important because you can get riled up if you hear one side and they're going off about, how horrible something is or how big of a deal something is, and you can get caught up in that, and it might be a legitimate thing. But if you get really caught up in it and then just go for it without thinking about it and researching it, or even just pausing for a minute to see what you think about it, then you can get caught up in something that may not be true, or maybe it's leaving out a very important aspect, or maybe it's in the end supporting a goal that you don't want to support. Again, people can get led by sheep, and a lot of that is through the media and through social media and just ways of getting people to react automatically, where it's just like stimulus response. Something happens and someone acts, and that's it. But you have to insert the critical thinking in between those steps, where something happens, then you think about it, and then you respond. And to me, at least, definitely in the public school system in America, critical thinking is not taught much at all. It's more how to memorize something and how to follow the rules and how to do what the teacher says. You're supposed to do this problem this certain way, and you're supposed to write your name in this exact place, and you're supposed to have all of this information, and this is the source that you use. And don't question any of it. You can't question your teacher. You can't question a textbook. You're supposed to just, they're the experts, and of course they're going to be right. And so when you grow up, it shouldn't be very surprising that people trust the experts, and they're told something, they see it on the news, oh, it must be true.
Yep.
And yeah, that they weren't really taught to think. And so that's something that we have to figure out on our own as we get older. And it's hard because you're caught up in your job and your family and your friends and the entertainment isn't all bad. We need to take some time to just relax and to hang out, and consuming entertainment can be a positive thing in small doses. And so it's hard to really try to learn, I guess, how to think and how to educate yourself and how to research things, um, when you weren't taught that, and that's not how you lived your whole childhood usually. And so it's kind of new. And then, like, the problem that you mentioned is a big problem, where you've got all these different sources, and we have access to more information than ever today with the internet. But you usually see the two extremes. It's either crazy conspiracy theories not backed up by anything, and they're way out there, or it's the official mainstream story and the mainstream narrative. And neither one are completely true, but they both have some truth behind them usually. And so you basically have to, at least what I've had to do, is look at both sides and then kind of figure out what's true and what's factual and what's most likely by kind of comparing the multiple different angles. And yeah, it's hard because it's hard to find content that's not emotional and that's not one-sided and that's not extremely biased. And I do try to provide that on my podcast, but I have my own biases, and there are things that I believe, and there are ideas and ideologies that I get behind that you might not, or someone else might not. Um, but hopefully, you could listen to me and listen to some other people that also present things in a similar fashion, but might have different opinions, and then then you could come up with your own opinion on things. But besides just having trouble finding sources, it's hard to find the time, and that's another issue. I mean, most of us don't have 5 hours a day to dedicate to this, and even finding 1 hour a day is hard. Like, I
It
listen
is.
in the car. Yeah, I listen in the car sometimes, but if I'm driving around with my wife or with the kids in the car, they're probably not very interested in listening to something about the American Revolution, or some random audiobook that they've now only listened to half a chapter of. Like, you can't really do that. And so, like, yeah, it's hard to find the time, it's hard to dedicate that time, it's hard to give up some aspect of, entertainment or something else you would have done. Yeah, it's just hard. Like all of this is hard, but it's very important at the same time. And so, like anything else, we have to find our own balance, and that's different for everybody. And I think that most people probably would and should probably focus on a certain area, something that they really believe in or they feel strongly about or they really want to educate themselves on, and dig into one area, something that is doable, something that's not too overwhelming, where you can kind of learn about something slowly from different sources. And that's much more realistic. Whereas maybe taking the approach of, oh, well, I don't know much about American history, and I don't know much about European history, and I don't know much about theology and the Reformation, and I also don't know much about blockchain and new technologies and big data. And I mean, that's just too much. You can't do that. But maybe if you're interested in the Reformation, then yeah, find out some stuff about the Reformation. Figure out what was happening. What were the ideas going on? What's the actual history there? Who are the players and that kind of stuff? And you can do that. And so I would probably actually suggest doing something a little more relevant to everyday life, but whatever it is you're interested in, maybe you're a history buff and that's what you're into, so go for it. Um, but yeah, that's what I like to try to promote is learning and thinking. And those are
Mm.
things that unfortunately most people think that that's what you do in school. And then once you're out of school, you don't do those things anymore. It's not cool, not worth your time. But in reality, you don't really do those things in school. Yeah, you learned some stuff. Yeah, you thought about some stuff, but you didn't really learn a lot of things that
No.
actually matter. And a lot of stuff got left out, and the way you were taught to think and the way you thought about it was probably all wrong and was not related to problem solving and critical thinking and things you can apply in your life. And so, no, you did not think, and no, you did not learn from that perspective in school. And then you get out of school and you think you still shouldn't think or learn. And that's
Mm.
how you have masses of sheep like being led around by whatever narratives are going around. And that's what needs to break. That's the pattern that needs to break. And I think that's what I'm really hoping, that the amount of information that's out there and podcasts like this one we're on now, like mine that I do, there's plenty of them out there where people are actually discussing things, and there's information, there's access to all this information, and a lot of it's free. And so
Mm.
hopefully with this access, people will start getting into it. Then you have events like this where maybe people are waking up because you had this massive pandemic around the world, or maybe it's seeing a black man murdered by a cop in the middle of the street. Maybe that wakes them up, or maybe it's seeing your government declare martial law in a big city. Whatever it is, hopefully people will wake up to whatever it is that prods them to wake up, and then they get into these things and actually start learning and applying things. And that's the positive side that I'm really hoping for, and that's what I believe in. And so I try to support that, and I do what I feel is my part and that I can do for it. But yeah, ultimately it's, what will people decide to do with their time and with their energy and their efforts and their thoughts? And I don't know. And
Mm.
it, it will be interesting to see how things play out. Will governments and corporations get away with this stuff forever? Will there be a new, revolutionary moment that goes through the world? I mean, I don't know. Any of this is possible, and so it's interesting to see how things are playing out and to see how people react to this stuff. And you can definitely see that herd mentality of, yeah, being sheep and being led certain way. But you also see a lot of, like, I listen to a lot of alternative media, and that's where I get my news and stuff from. And there's a lot of that out there. There's a lot of good content out there for free. And so those things are also gaining steam. And yeah, I'm curious to see how this will play out, because I know that the alternative side is going to keep producing stuff and keep getting further. Technology is going to improve. Access is going to improve. I also know that corporations and governments and institutions will try to take more power. They do want control. They do want to steer the human race as a whole, oftentimes. And so there's an inherent battle there. Those are two opposite things. And so how those play out and who ultimately it gets more power and gets to retain their freedoms, and how that will play out worldwide, I think is very interesting just in general. But with this pandemic and with these massive things going on worldwide right now, at this point in time that we are in currently, I feel like a lot of that stuff is happening, and we're seeing the beginnings of all this. And so, yeah, we're kind of at the ground level, history in the making. And if we're aware of it and we're aware of these different things going on, then we notice them and we can study them and kind of figure out what's really going on and understand things better. And so that's the interesting part to me, is that I am aware of certain aspects, and since I've been researching this type of thing, they really stand out to me. And so when I hear a certain bit of information, even if it's only a tiny piece from the mainstream news, I hear a name, or I hear a corporation that's involved, or a bill that's being passed, and I actually can make all these different connections because I've done the research on stuff, and I can kind of figure out the true story, even though it might be just total propaganda piece. And that's really cool. Like, I enjoy that. That's really neat. And I can do that because I've taken some time to research and learn about stuff, and it works well that way. And that's how I try to not be a sheep. And so we all have different ways of doing that, and it's just hopefully these events will kind of wake people up and get them to not be sheep and kind of be their own person. And it doesn't mean you have to be an academic. It just means that, take freedom and liberties and ideologies seriously, and what you really believe in, and actually think about it and live it out. And that's something that I think anyone can get behind. And hopefully more people are getting behind that now.
Yeah. um that's, I mean, that's what I'm saying, like I keep coming like these flashbacks at the beginning of lockdown, and all the social media things I've seen. As I mentioned at the beginning, they, I mean, obviously sharing it, or sometimes I do as well, my beliefs and stuff, and I can be judgy uh, towards people who are not really sharing the same uh, beliefs what I have.
Yeah.
But what is the difference? Like, it's a different topic and I don't want to bring it up, but um, the problem is with people who actually think that we all sheeps and we are just being led by the government. Fine, but what I see different between them and you, as I said already, or I think a few times, that you are teaching. I think this is the right word, because they scare and they just giving out some piece of information, the most scary words, like 5G. I will bring it up again. that 5G is a virus. There is no biologic or anything, like it's nothing to do with it. It's just a wave for radioactive or whatever thing is. There's nothing to do with any virus. It's 5G makes you sick, and of course it scared me as well. Like I have a new phone, and I was like, oh my god, and that's a problem. Not sharing actual information. Yeah, bring it up. That's, as you also mentioned, 9/11. There was no the second tower had no plane, and still went down. Or was no plane whatsoever anywhere. But you know what I mean? Like, but you can, if you do your research, you can see there was at least one plane, or I don't know how, but second, how was it? I mean, I don't know too much about it either, but it's not because, well, I just not, as in not interested, but it was a history for sure, because that, again, you said that was the lie. But I heard as well that was actually the American government made it happen so they can go to fight for oil and stuff like that. I don't know. I didn't went into it, but I think there is a big possibility that can happen. But yeah, that's a problem. That's who I seen so far sharing that what's happening now. It's a government or not a government. I don't think they're doing it the right way, because I think, yes, I'm not saying I'm any different than others, but I know, like, for me, it's like I can read something, I think about it. I'm not going to panic. It scares me maybe, and I think about it a couple of days. But I know that if I am really, really into it or want to know, I know I'm going to hit Google up and start a little bit more to look into it, but I'm just choose not to. But there are so many people out there who actually really, really get scared. As you say, they react by the emotions and they can't think straight to either turn off the news, because that's what I do. I just turn it off, and that's why also I'm not going on Facebook either much, because I'm more like sharing articles like that. That's why I got as well upset a few days ago, because I saw some silly murder back in Hungary, which it was really upsetting. And I was like, why I even went on Facebook? I'm not doing it for 2 years almost at all. I just only have it for my family, for group phone calls or Messenger, but that's it. But that's why I have it, kind of. And I'm not saying Instagram is much better, because it started being very similar to that for me, getting more about this whole thing. But I think it's too much power as well on social media to people who actually don't know what they're sharing about. I may one of these as well, one of those people who sometimes don't know the actual information, but you just share it. You know what I mean? It's like, and I definitely, and I mean it to your podcast. You do focus on the American side, so it's not everything relevant to me as a European, or because I'm living in UK. But it's almost always like, if it's American, it's going to be global in a sense. So so you know what I mean? It's like, it's still good to know. And I'm going to keep going back and check what's else you got to say, because your style is definitely really educational. And even your bio, when I was reading, I was like, oh my god, I don't even want to talk to him, because I will be like just about kind of, yes, because I have no clue about a lot of things. But that's the whole point of I know you do interviews and talk to people who is in a similar circle to yours, but I think it's a very good thing that you're talking to me now, because my circle does not I don't know actually who is listening to my podcast, but I started Generation Q because of COVID, but it's in a similar, not the similar approach whatsoever like yours about this, at least the 3 episodes you did. But I think even if I'm a little bit nervous to listen to you because of your knowledge you have and I don't have, at not close to yours, but it's good because it means that I'm learning, and whoever going to listen to this, they learn to, even if it's just 5 minutes they listen, they're going to have a bit of a voice there, and maybe it starts something to more people, just a little bit. And even if they like, I'm gonna end this podcast, but they're going to go and check you out, that's even better. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the whole point, to start a movement with that book as well, what you mentioned. I want to check out everything, or just a small conversation between 2 friends, it starts something. We have to stop being like this. We have to stop it. And
Yeah, I've done so in season 2 of my podcast, I'm doing a comparison between the time of the Reformation and modern times and all the shifts that are going on and stuff. And part of that is the technology of the printing press and things being mass produced. And you saw a lot of the same worries that existed at the time as we've even talked about here, where people were worried that a lot of information would be out there and it'd be like information overload and people couldn't process it because there would just be too much. Some people were worried about whether people that were writing things were qualified to write them, and if it was just going to be basically like trash literature and all the classics are going to be forgotten about. And people worried about a lot of this stuff, but in reality, we can look back now and see that the printing press, one of the biggest impacts it had was spreading the Reformation. And the Reformation was a movement based on ideology and based on something a little more academic. It was more about thoughts and ways of thinking and ways of processing things. It wasn't just about politics or economics or anything else. It was theology. It was an intellectual movement. But the printing press did spread that, and people were talking about ideas. They were looking from different perspectives, and you had authors that were saying that the church is corrupt and don't listen to them, and some were saying, oh, we need to start this other church and then we can have all the power and we're going to do things the right way. And then other people were saying, oh, don't do a church at all, just do your own thing. And people had a lot of different opinions. But it was a movement that really gained traction and made a big difference in the world. That's one of the big points in history, especially European history, but I'd say history of the modern world, really, because the influence of Christianity and thoughts of the Reformation really led to the American Revolution, the French Revolution. Things like this were highly influenced by that type of thought. And so I like the idea that an intellectual movement that changed the world really happened, and it mainly was moved by this technology of the printing press. And we have a similar thing today with the technology of the internet. And there is a decent chance, as I've been playing out a lot of different parallels, a lot of the stuff that happened then are very similar to the things that are happening now. A lot of the same shifts. It's different players. You've got the state, for example, takes the place of the church at that point in time. But a lot of them are playing out. So we could see something like that where some of these movements really start to gain traction now that we have the technology, now that we have some disruptions that have happened in society. And you've seen some of this stuff in the background. Same with the Reformation. There were people talking about this decades before Martin Luther, and it finally gained steam at a specific point in time when the technology was ready for it and when just society and culture seemed to be ready for it, and it hit, and it changed everything. And so yeah, we might be able to have that with something like podcasting, or something that we use the internet for. There is a historical example of that happening and that working. And so it's not out of the question to think that that could happen today. And that's what I'm really hoping for. So like the comparison between the church historically and the state today is really interesting, because it's not as much of a metaphor as I first thought. I was first thinking that the church had this role of they directed a lot of politics in that time with all the different areas in Europe. They made a lot of the decisions. They were kind of the overarching authority. They took care of welfare and education and all these types of things that the state takes care of today. But the more you dig into how people relate to the state today, especially in comparison to the church, it becomes more and more clear that the state, I guess people's relationship with the state is a religion. It's, you have these songs that you sing, you have these hand motions that you make, you have these certain rituals that are done. So you have the special priest class, or the politicians. They do a certain ritual of writing a bill and voting on it, and all of a sudden you've got these new things. And it's stuff that applies to everybody universally. They tell you what's right and what's wrong, what you can do and what you can't do. I mean, it's like all the aspects are the same as a religion. It's based on faith. It's not that there is like a thing called government. It's not you can go, oh, well, show me the government. Let me see it, and I want to understand it. Like an alien comes down to Earth, and they're like, what's this government thing? What are you talking about? And you try to explain it to them. So, so you have some people that rule over everybody else. So, well, no, it's not like that. See, we have the power, we have the control. We are in charge of the government. It's like, oh, so you can tell the government what to do. Well, not really me, but we as the people, we can do it. Well, show me this government so I can see, who it is, what it is. Oh, well, you can't really see it. It's this thing. It's a system. You have to believe that they have the power and the rights, and they're going to do the right thing. And it's the people that really have power, but they make the laws and tell you what to do. Well, you get how that kind of breaks down. It's hard.
I
But
love that metaphor. Yeah, a lot. Or
well, it's not. I will admit it is not mine originally. I heard it from a guy named Larkin Rose.
doesn't
And
matter. It works well.
okay, I kind of compared a few metaphors there, but he's the main one. But yeah, it's the idea of how people think of the state and government and how society should be organized. It is a religion in its current form, and so that gives me even more hope that these parallels with the time of the Reformation and breaking that up, that becoming more decentralized and people having different ideas and listening to different ideas and thinking about different ways of doing things. And it actually worked out fairly well at that point in time. Maybe we'll have the same thing now and things will work out well in our time. And that's what I'm hoping for. Because a lot of this stuff, when you really dig into it, it's like conspiracy, like 9/11, like you said. That's one where when you really dig into it, no, you cannot definitively prove that the U.S. government was behind 9/11, and they might not have been. They might have been. I don't know. But you can clearly see when you dig into it that the official story and the official narrative is wrong. It's false. It's not true. Um, and so it's the same with all of these things. Like if you really dig into how people view the state and government and how government treats the people, it doesn't matter what country you're in. When you really dig into that, like I said, it's like a religion. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about it logically. It's like, well, the reason you have a government is because people can't be trusted and they're going to do bad things. And so it's like, oh, so you take a few of those people that you can't trust and that do bad things and put them in charge of everybody else? That's going to go well? It's like, no, that's very naive. That's not going to work. And I think historically you can see that doesn't work. But on the other hand, most people think, well, what's the alternative? Oh, chaos and anarchy in the streets. And it's like, well, no, it's like the extremes we've talked about and everything else. That's one extreme and the other. And reality is somewhere in between. That there are ways of organizing society differently, especially with technology we have today, and people can take more control over their lives and over society and their impact in society. And there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to discuss. There's a lot of ideas that should be debated, and these should be the conversations in our modern digital reformation, is talking about these things and really working it out. And even the common people, like I mentioned Thomas Paine when he published Common Sense, how that was going around to just common people. Like we're starting to see common people consume podcasts and really get into it. And so hopefully that is not all steered towards comedy and true crime podcasts that really don't affect you whatsoever. They're entertainment. Again, there's nothing wrong with entertainment, but hopefully also people are using them to keep up with current events or to educate themselves on something or to expose themselves to a different perspective that they might not be aware of, that kind of stuff. And I think that's very beneficial. And especially if that goes mainstream and a lot of people start doing that, then we can see some really big shifts in society for the better. And that's something that I do see playing out. And whether or not it really takes hold and plays out the way we would want it to or not, I really don't know. I mean, obviously we can't tell the future, but we can see that there is potential for that. And so, yeah, that's what I think I try to do. I try to do what I think I'm good at in helping those types of ideas. And then hopefully other people do what they think they're good at in doing that and living that out in their lives. And we can actually see some real change. And hopefully that's not co-opted by other things. We mentioned
Mm.
distractions, and instead of abuse of power, you focus on racism. Instead of pollution, you focus on controlling all business and regulation, or whatever the case may be. Civil rights movements, the feminist movement, all of these different movements typically get co-opted, and you have people that have certain goals they want to push through, and they use the movement to get that done. I'm sure that will still happen. It always happens, but still, you can have some big change, and that's what I see potential for, and I'm really hoping takes hold. And I'm more and more encouraged, I guess, the more I look into it, and the more I see people doing these types of things and living it out and learning. And it's very encouraging, and hopefully that continues to take off.
Well, I think just amen to that. That's that's all I can say, because I mean, seriously, the amount of information you have is mind blowing, and I just keep like, I can't believe how everything how you can talk about without any pressure or anything, all this kind of stuff. And I know you could still go and on and on and on, and this is beautiful. Like, I'm like, like, wow, and I love it. And
Thank you.
yes, no, seriously, as I said, it's not everything is, I am always open-minded for anything. You can talk to me about everything, and I can, like, okay, especially even if it's, I have different opinion about it, but I'm always the person that you can talk your side, your opinion, you can share. And I may going to still disagree, but at least I am open to see what you think of the same subject. And I think we all should be like this, to be able to talk. And I'm not saying because I'm disagree or anything with you right now, but it can it can happen always, but we have to be respectful with each other, and this must be this is I think the key. Well, don't lie and respect each other. These two, like and then the changes definitely can be applied, or anything. But
and disagreement is very helpful as long as you can be respectful and you can consider other perspectives and you're open to things. Then disagreement is very beneficial. You debate topics and it helps you to understand them and see different perspectives, and that's really good. And so that is a battle that's happening now, where a lot of people can't debate. They just argue and get mad and run away. And it's easy to do online because you see something you don't like, you just click it away and you're gone. Or you just type, a little one sentence remark about something and, make fun of it, and then you go away. But actually, having discussions and debates and these types of things are very good if they can be done in a good way, and in a way that's actually beneficial and promotes progress and promotes thinking. These are really good. In general, I am actually at the point where I need to get off. So
yeah, of course. Well, it's past 11 already p.m. and I have to be
oh
up
wow,
like
okay.
very, very early. But yeah, no, I could still listen though, even I'm starting being a little bit tired. But it it was awesome. I
Yeah,
loved
thank you
it.
for having me on.
No, thank you. Even months later, I definitely need to go and check your podcast. But are you on just the Podbean? Yeah,
So I'm
or
on
somewhere else?
Podbean. Yeah, Podbean is who I do my hosting through, so that's like where the website is, and you can stream from there. But it's also on Apple Podcasts and
Okay.
Stitcher and all the main players. So yeah, if you or anybody else wants to look it up, you just search for Our Foundations and you can find it. And it's pretty much on all of them now.
Okay, no, I will. For me, I'm a Spotify user,
Okay.
but I think lots of people are Apple podcast
Yes.
user. So I think this two is the main. I mean, as far as I know. But I was listening to you now on the website. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me on. I enjoyed
thank
it.
you
I
too.
like talking about all this kind of stuff.
I
It's
can
something
see,
I'm
and
really
this
interested in.
it's really cool. It's really cool. You keep doing, because I want to know about a couple of things. So I need to get into your podcast and then just search and browse and everything what I can see there and learn from.
Yeah.
So you keep doing
It's
your
it's
work.
interesting.
It is. I want to see that pattern of this what you just mentioned. Your second season and all that thing. I wanna
Yeah, that's
dive
a good
into it.
one. It's a little different because I did the first half where I brought on other people that were kind of experts in different aspects, and we kind of talked about how that parallel plays out a little bit. And it kind of changed. The first one I did is the first interview I've ever done in my life, so I feel it still turned out fairly well, but there are things that I did differently as I went on with the other interviews. But that's interesting because the interview format is not what I do in season one, so it's a little different. And I'm actually finishing up that aspect and getting back into the solo stuff. But yeah, it's really interesting. It's as I've dug more into history, I've learned how relevant that actually is in understanding
Mhm.
modern times and like kind of noticing things that are happening. It's not just this dry stuff you learned in school. Like there's actually stuff that matters and applies, and so that's been very beneficial to me. And like I have people I listen to that I feel a lot like you just said about me, where it's I listen to somebody and they know about all these different things and how they connect, and they just name off dates and names and they know it all. And yeah, I feel a little intimidated by it, but yeah, I'm glad that it comes across that I have learned a lot, so I do have a lot of knowledge, and hopefully that comes across in a good way where yeah, I I guess that I am credible and that I do know what I'm talking about, and hopefully I am sticking. That's what I try to do is stick with the stuff that I feel like I have understood after I've done all this research and stuff, and I feel confident in these areas that I know and understand them fairly well. And so I'm still learning about lots of other things from all these other people that know things so much more than I do. And yeah, it's one of those things that just never ends. Like learning never ends, and that's a good thing. And
Ye-
yeah, I try to continue.
Yes, but again, just a few seconds before you go. But that's a good thing, because you were listening to those people and you wanted to know more. And I was listening to you and I was talking to you, and now I want to know more. Maybe not exactly the same topic what you are, feel home. But what I am interested about, I feel like I actually, if I want to spread my my words, my voice, my thoughts, then I have to actually dig into a little bit more to be more, I don't know, like, so this is how it starts, the chain, the wave, like from one person to another, and that's a beauty in it. So
Yeah.
thank
Well,
you very
thank you
much.
for
You did inspire me about doing my things a little bit more serious
yeah. Well,
in a
thanks for
way.
letting me be part of that wave of learning.
Thank you very much. You're gonna hear from me as well. Still,
Okay.
obviously about when I did this a little bit. But thank you so
Okay.
much. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. I got my family just came home, so
That's
I'm done.
all right. Hi guys. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you later then.
Yes, we'll do. Bye.